Thank you very much for your welcome. I'm Brian Harris. Served for many years as principal of Vale Seminary. After it's combined together with Morning College at the end of 2020. Still do some lecturing there, but now at the Avenir Leadership Institute. And it's a great privilege to be here with you today. I'm wanting us to look at the topic of noticing God. Noticing God. And I think it's probably quite important that you, in this process of discernment as a church together, it was lovely to be listening in with Karen and to hear something heard there. Can you all hear me okay? If you can't all hear me okay? Is that better? Are we in there? Okay, that's better. We've got it. So I'm not going to repeat everything that I said. It was hugely important, but at any rate, lovely to be with you in this period where you try and discern what God is saying together about your future. And today I want us to look at the topic of noticing God. Now, I'm glad that I can be with you today because last week, if I'd been due to preach last Sunday, I would have been in isolation. It was in isolation because I recently had COVID, and it turned out okay for me, and I feel absolutely fine again. But it reminded me that sometimes you can say, yes, I'll preach that Sunday, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, and then something happens and you've just suddenly got to cancel everything, and you have a week of cancellations in your hand. And reminded me of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law died back in 2017. She was 100 years old. And she died, she was very old when she died, but she was old even when she was alive. She was born old. She was one of those people who was probably from a slightly earlier era. And so many of her little mannerisms were kind of dated. And you saw that when she wrote, and she certainly would write. She'd never kind of email or something like that. And we get letters from her, and they would be filled with this little 2 letters, DV, DV. I'm planning to go shopping this afternoon, DV. I will watch TV with Edie this evening, DV. I will visit my friend next week, DV. And DV stands for Dio Volente, God willing. And she was always doing something that I guess in a previous era was very common. She would say, I am planning to do this, but I recognize that actually I don't have the final say. That ultimately it's if God is willing, and if God isn't willing, then I'm not going to be able to do it. And it's something that perhaps we've forgotten, but maybe in COVID times we've been reminded of again, that actually we aren't always so certain about just what the future will hold. And in fairly uncertain times, how do we notice where God is at work? In uncertain times, how do we notice where God is at work? And I think it helps perhaps just to remember some basic affirmations. When we say let's notice where God is at work, let's remember the affirmation of Jesus, and you find it in John chapter 5, verse 17. I'll just read a particular verse for you. So in John chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus has just performed an amazing miracle. There's been a man, he's been crippled for 38 years. He's been by the pool of Bethesda. It's a remarkable pool. Wherever the waters stir, if you get there first, you're healed. Except that in 38 years he had never been the first. This man didn't know what winning meant. But he won that day because somehow Jesus noticed him and said to him, stand up, take up your bed and walk. And the man had been miraculously healed on that day. Now you would have thought that would be an occasion where everyone was jumping up and down and high-fiving and saying, this is amazing, this is remarkable, this is incredible, we're so pleased about it. But to the contrary, the Jewish religious leaders were horrified. Why were they horrified? They were horrified because this was, oh my goodness, this was the Sabbath day. And on the Sabbath day, there were all kinds of rules and restrictions about what you could do. Now, Jesus, let's be clear about this. This is a little point we sometimes miss from this passage. Jesus wasn't about being a little bit provocative. Jesus wasn't always the gentle Jesus, meek and mild. He sometimes was a kind of a, so think about that and take that, thank you very much kind of a person, because think about this miracle. It's a Sabbath day. This man's been there for 38 years and he wants to heal him. So that's great. That's absolutely lovely. It says water. That's great. He wants to heal this man. But what does he say to this man? Let's just listen in because it's so provocative when Jesus actually says it. So here he is. And let me just find it here. So the infant replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat and walk. Oh my goodness, all Jesus needed to have said was, get up and walk. Because in the Sabbath day, you were allowed to walk. I mean, they got there in the first place. But you couldn't work. You couldn't do things like pick up mats and walk. So Jesus would have been fine and in safe territory if you had just said to the man, you've been lying here for 38 years, stand up, walk, you can pick up your mat tomorrow. I mean, this is a Jewish community. No one's going to pinch it, thank you very much. And frankly, after 38 years, I don't think anyone would want it. But there you go. Jesus doesn't do that. He says, get up, walk, and take up your mat. Now, when he said take your mat, he was saying, work on the Sabbath day. Oh, my. Do you see how he's being provocative? Completely unnecessary for him to say that. But he said it. Why does he say it? Well, the religious leaders are furious about it, and they come and they say, why do you actually do this? And then Jesus, who's still ever provocative, he comes and he says something more. Because as you go to verse 16, Jesus says, so because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense. I mean, it's amazing to think that Jesus had to defend himself from performing a miracle. You would have thought that people would congratulate him and thank him. But instead, Jesus finds himself on the defensive. I have to defend myself for performing miracles. In his defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am working. Oh my goodness. Jesus did not know how to defend himself. This is his defense. In his defense, Jesus says, my Father, who is God. I mean, do you think that they were going to say, that's fine, that you're calling God your Father? I mean, Jesus was being very provocative. But what does Jesus say? My Father is always working, and I too am working. Now, I want us to really latch into this very fundamental truth here. Jesus is saying, I am always working, and my Father is always working. I don't care if it's Sabbath. I don't care when it is. God is always at work in the world. Now, this is something we need to hold on to our faith. So when we say, let's notice God, let's start from this point of saying, we notice God because we believe that God is always at work. Let's think of some other passages. There was a passage that Grace read to us, the Elisha passage. And if you remember, it comes from 2 Kings 6. Elisha is been a real problem to the king of Aram. So the king of Aram used to have these little raids into Israel and used to pinch all kinds of things that weren't his. But Elisha, God would kind of tell Elisha where the king of Aram was going to in fact be, and then he'd alert the king of Israel, and the king of Aram was never successful. And the king of Aram, suddenly realizing that in fact he had some kind of a traitor in his midst, is very annoying. He said, so who's this person who always knows in advance what I'm going to do? And his servants say to him, well, there's this prophet, Elisha. And God tells him what he's supposed to do. So King Aram says, well, I'm going to go and capture Elisha, thank you very much. And that's the backdrop. And one day, Elisha wakes up, and his servant has in fact just come rushing to him and said, oh, Elisha, this is terrible. Look at all this army that's around. And they've come, and they're going to capture you. What is going to happen? And Elisha says some remarkable things at this time, and let's hear them. As he's faced with this pretty desperate situation, in 2 Kings, chapter 6, he speaks to a servant. And the servant has just seen just this whole army that's around them, surrounding them. I mean, how would you feel at a moment like that? And Elisha just calmly says, don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And so like, what? What are you talking about? Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing wrong with my eyesight. I can see, and those people are not with us. Thank you very much. And then Elisha says this remarkable thing, and Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. The Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and saw the hills full of horses and chariots all around Elisha. Now, here's the significant thing. Did those chariots suddenly arrive when Elisha prayed? Was Elisha's prayer, Lord, I'm stuck and I'm in a very difficult position. Please send some reinforcements. Was that Elisha's prayer? No, it was not. His prayer was simply, open his eyes that he may see. I mean, these chariots of fire are always here. They're always protecting us. My Father is always at work, and I'm here, and I am actually with you. The question is not whether I am here. The question is, have you noticed? Have you noticed? Do you see that I'm actually with you? I mean, it's a very pertinent question. And it's a very, very basic truth about faith. It's Jesus, and the way in which he teaches us. He says, ask, and you will receive. Knock, and the door will be open. And he encourages us to have the faith to actually test God and to try God. Or you think of James chapter 4, verse 8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. What am I trying to say right at the start? Let's, as the people of God, recognize that while we are in a day where we cannot control everything that happens, we do have a God who is always at work, a God who is always present, a God who knows exactly what he's doing, and a God who invites us to draw near to him, to spot him, to notice him, to knock at the door, to see it being opened. It's a God who says, have a little bit of faith in me. Don't lose your faith. Don't become discouraged. And he says, kind of claim the promise that I'm there to be noticed and I'm always at work. So what would it mean to be a church that noticed where God was at work? What would it mean for you as individuals to notice God? Well, sometimes we need to notice little things about what God is doing. Sometimes God helps us to notice in what we sometimes thought were major setbacks. So God just saying, think again and reposition yourself. Let me tell you a story, and it may sound a little bit of a strange one, but just bear with me. So, a brag point. When I was at school, I won the English prize. That was like 50 years ago, however many years ago it was, but I won the English prize when I was at school, so wonderful. Now, a confession. In spite of having won the English prize when I was at school, I've always been a little bit grammatically challenged. And like if you say to me, analyze this sentence and tell me, where the adverbs are and where the conjunctions are and whether this is and everything else, my eyes kind of glaze over and I don't do particularly well. I think I won the English prize because I can be quite a creative writer and I think I can see significance in things, but please, if you want a grammatical analysis, I am not the person to go to. Well, I've been in academia for quite a long time, and if you're an academic, you know that you have to write. You've got to write articles and you've got to produce journal articles and so on. And so very, very early on, and I was back in South Africa, I was principal of Rosemount Bible College in those days, I thought, well, I just finished a master's degree at that stage. I thought, let me get an article published from the research that I've done. After all, I know I can write. I won the English prize at school, so how hard can that be for someone as gifted as I am? That, they'll just be begging to publish everything I ever write. So I write this article and I send it off. And do you know anything about academia? Your articles get sent off for peer review and sent off to a reasonably reputable journal. They sent off for peer review, and the review came back and was absolutely a scathing rejection of my article. It was just horrible. And I made the big mistake of reading that rejection just over and over and over again. And amongst other things, I remember very clearly this reviewer said, the author of this article appears to be grammatically challenged and has consistently placed his apostrophes in the wrong position. Thank you very much. I won the English prize. And you say that I put my apostrophes in all the wrong places. This is just horrible. And as I said, it was a mistake to have read that rejection quite as many times as I did. At the end of it, I thought, okay, well, that's it. Clearly, I can't write contrary to what my high school thought. And if I can't write, I can't write. So I'll just try and be a good teacher, and that will be what I do. And so for a very long period of time, I didn't even attempt to write anything at all. And then I moved to Australia and became principal of what was then Baptist Theological College of Western Australia, became both seminary, now Morning College, lots of name changes. One of the lecturers and staff said to me, "Brian, why don't you ever publish anything? You write quite well." And he was speaking based on just like documents I had to write for the staff and so on. And I said, "No, I don't write. It's something I can't really do." And he said, "No, I think you can." And I said, "No, I don't think I can." And he said, "Just write something. I'll give you a bit of advice and I'll help you a bit, but I'm sure that you can do it." Well, to cut a long story short, I wrote it, started to get published, and in fact, I've now published 6 books, and I've written over 30 published journal articles, and I've written hundreds of inspirational articles and everything else. And why am I telling you that? I think I'm telling you that because I recognize that you need to recognize the difference between commas and full stops. You see, I had what I thought was a full stop rejection early on in my academic career. And the way I read it was, I sent off an article and it was scathingly rejected. Full stop, end of story. And so for really well over a decade, I didn't even try to write again. I mean, I wrote an article and it was scathingly rejected, full stop. But what someone came alongside me and helped me to see was that actually sometimes what you think is a full stop is actually just a comma. And the sentence is supposed to be, I wrote an article and it was scathingly rejected, comma, but sometimes you have to persevere, comma, and so I did, comma, and now I've published 6 books and written 30 journal articles and published hundreds of others, popular articles, full stop. Like, sometimes we need to allow what we think are full stops to be turned into commas. And sometimes that's when we start to notice what God is doing. And sometimes in our life we think that something is a dead-end area, but actually God is wanting to open up a new era for us. He's saying, take a brief little pause, take a comma. I mean, catch your breath for a little while, but don't view that as being the end. Because actually I still have a future for you. And there's so many ways, it seems to me that one of the fundamental callings of being Christians are helping people who think they have full stops to turn them into commas. I mean, you might, for example, be a teacher. And here you might be a teacher of, say, a Year 4 child. And maybe you have a Year 4 class, and there's a child in the class who, though they're in Year 4, they haven't yet learned to read. Now that's a sentence that goes, I'm in Year 4 and I can't yet read, so the future is going to be very bleak indeed. Full stop. Well, that's it. I mean, if you can't read by the time you're in Year 4, the future is going to be very bleak indeed. But how could it be if you're the teacher of that class and you say, what would it be if I turn that full stop into a comma? So instead of I'm a Year 4 child and I can't yet read, so the future's going to be very bleak indeed, comma, but Mrs. Jones is my teacher and she's amazing and she's noticed me and she's recognized why I have these problems and she's going to help me to overcome them, and I think things are going to open up and I can do it after all. I mean, what would it be if a child had someone like that? That's turning a full stop into a comma. And it's saying that actually God is always at work. And if God is always at work, full stops are often not full stops. And paragraphs that seem to have ended and stories that seem to have ended sometimes have not ended at all, but can carry on and have new hope and a new way forward. Or maybe you're a high school teacher and you're as a kid and they're just playing out terribly and they're about to be expelled. I mean, they've just done far too many things that are actually wrong. And you look at them and their story is, my home life is terrible. And so I'm playing up at school. I'm about to be expelled. And soon I will be in prison. Full stop. Or that's it, story over. But how about if you're the teacher who sees that sentence as my home life is terrible, so I'm playing up at school, I'm about to be expelled, and soon I will be in prison. Except that the amazing Mr. Smith won't be fooled by me and keeps on working with me and keeps on encouraging me and keeps on helping me to see new possibilities, and suddenly I feel that I have some different options in life. I mean, that's turning a comma. That's turning a full stop into a comma. That's actually noticing what God is doing. So let me ask you this question. If we are to notice God, and put this for yourselves first of all, are there some areas in your life where you have confused full stops and commas? Where you in fact are saying, that's it, it's over, nothing's ever going to happen there, finito. And God is wanting to say, I am always at work. Don't give up so quickly. Turn that into a comma. There's still a future there. Or how about you as a church congregation? Are there some areas where you feel like this is the full stop? God is saying, no. It's just the pause for breath. It's just the pause to reorientate. It's a pause to see maybe I must do something a little bit differently now. I mean, could it be that that's what God is saying to you as a church congregation? And what about other people? Are there people that you know who think that in fact their life has come to a full stop? And you need to say to them, no, you can turn that into a comma. There's still hope. There's still a way forward there. Don't give up. So notice what God is doing in your life. Notice what God is doing in the lives of other people. Let me add one more thing very quickly. We sometimes think that God is not at work because something goes very badly. Something might go very badly wrong. And so our conclusion is, well, there you go. I don't know what God was doing there, but clearly God isn't really at work. There is an amazing story from church history of St. Benedict, founder of the Benedictine order. So he ministered in the 500s, so it goes back a very long time now. As a very young man, he was sent by his abbot to a monastery. And he really just wanted to be left alone there. He didn't want to do anything other than just pray. He had an absolute passion for God, and he was a bit an introvert, and he just wanted to have time to pray and to be left alone and to be a monastic. But his abbot saw in him something of a little bit of leadership inside of him and said, Benedict, you must actually head this abbey and you must be in charge of it. And so very reluctantly, because Benedict was a very reluctant leader, Benedict took over the leadership of that particular abbey. And he was a young man, and as young men often are, he was extraordinarily zealous, very enthusiastic about everything he did, very passionate. And he wanted all the monks to be as passionate as he was. And he looked at them and he thought that they were a very undisciplined bunch, that they didn't pray nearly enough, that they weren't nearly sacrificial enough, that they weren't nearly devoted enough. And he kind of made an ever stricter order. And in fact got so strict and so impossible that the monks actually hated him. Now, hate is a very strong word, and you say, are you sure that they really hated him? They didn't just dislike him a little bit. Well, hold on. They tried to murder him. So I think that qualifies for a hate description. And we know that they tried to murder him because they, in fact, poisoned his wine. And as the story goes, Benedict, who had completely alienated himself from all these monks, they poisoned his wine, and at the evening meal, Benedict does what he always does. He prays God's blessing over the meal. And as he prays the blessing, the wine cup just shatters. And the monks, who had a slightly uneasy conscience, kind of confessed, oh, so sorry, we did try to murder you, but it looks as though God has intervened and stopped us from doing this. We're so sorry, Benedict. And like if we'd been strict before, I'm sure we'd be even stricter now. Benedict was absolutely shattered by what would take place. I mean, you could have thought that he could have looked at that event and said, well, wow, God is amazing. God protected me. God caused the wine glass to shatter. I was safe. Everything's fine. No, Benedict was quite a sensitive young man. And he just couldn't believe that people hated him that much. And like that was the only thing you could think about. These people wanted to murder him. Like, I mean, if God hadn't intervened, they would have murdered me. Like, what have I done that people hate me so much? And like he just couldn't operate for a long period of time. And he just withdrew. And he said, I can't eat, I can't do anything. Can't do anything, thank you very much. People hate me this much. And for many, many years, he just retreated, just lived entirely on his own. But in that time, God came and worked inside of him and reoriented him and eventually set him back. And he founded the Benedictine order, probably the most hospitable of all the monastic orders, one which, through the centuries has been welcoming to people in all kinds of difficult circumstances and tragic circumstances. The Benedictines have been known for their warm, embracing hospitality. And it all came back to an incident where some monks tried to murder the founder of the order. I mean, what kind of a God does that? Our God, who is remarkable, who looks at extraordinary circumstances and says, I am always at work. Don't ever think that I'm not working. And when you think that it's a full stop, sometimes it's just a comma. When you get your scathing rejection letter that says that you can't write, well, actually, maybe it's just a comma. And incidentally, let me just do a little bit of a promo here. I have written a new book that has come out relatively recently. Why Christianity is Probably True. It's actually probably worth reading. If you want, $20. There's some other books there as well. But let me not do too much advertising here. Like, seriously, when you think it's over, remember God is still alive. When you think that there's no future, remember God is still alive. When you think that there's no way forward, remember God is alive. Jesus recklessly, on that miraculous day when he had healed a man, looked at the religious leaders and said, my Father is always at work. My Father is always at work, and so am I. And that's true still today. God is still at work. Lord, give us eyes that are open, that we can see. Let's pray together. As we quiet together, just think about your own life. Have you written some areas off? Put a very firm full stop in. Are you open to God challenging you? Is God challenging you and saying, how would it be if we made that a comma instead? What have you learned in the pause? What do you need to do a little bit differently? And how do you now carry on and complete this to a better ending? And maybe take a little step of faith. Say, God, show me someone who has concluded that they've come up against a full stop, but you want to turn that into a comma. Lord, do you want me to be that person who helps them to do that? And ask God to tell you what it would take for you to be someone who turns a full stop into a comma. And then let's pray for us as a congregation at this time of discernment. Lord, you are always at work. Please show us our part in your plan. Help us to work in accordance with your will. Help us to notice you. Amen.
Thank you, Brian. Listening to Brian then, I was reminded